Soapy Smith was one of the most notorious criminals in all of America. He'd scammed dozens of mining towns out of thousands of dollars, barrels of gold and silver. Everyone hated him. He'd moved on to Skagway, Alaska, the site of America's new massive gold rush. And Soapy Smith continued his scams. But one moment changed his life forever. Evangeline Booth worked for the Salvation Army. She was a nurse for the Salvation Army. After she held a revival service, where Soapy Smith happened to be hanging out in the back corner, she walked over to him. She asked him how he was and how he was feeling. She genuinely cared about him, and that was a feeling Soapy Smith had never felt for his whole decades of scamming and trickery. After a 2-hour conversation, Soapy Smith gave his life to Jesus Christ. He gave up on his ways, and it was all because someone listened to him. This principle of listening to people and genuinely hearing them out will change everyone's life. And it especially matters when we want to seek the truth in the news and understand what's going on in current events, and actually understand the opinions of others around us, instead of simply being angry. We can all agree that this is a wonderful principle to pursue, but unfortunately, we see that this principle is not being pursued by some today. As we can see from the prompt that we'll be talking about today, was CBS pulling its 60 Minutes segment on CCOT the right move? To analyze that, we'll first look at what that question actually means, and second, then we'll talk about the duty that media owes to us, its consumers. So let's start with this prompt about CBS pulling its 60 Minutes interview. To give a little bit of background, 60 Minutes is a segment that goes around finding extremely interesting stories and going in depth. Sometimes 60 Minutes is presented as an interview where they interview someone famous, or sometimes they go on the road. So here, 60 Minutes interviewed two former prisoners. These prisoners were sent they were illegal immigrants to the United States. The Trump administration then deported them to CCOT, which is a high-security prison in El Salvador, a country in Central America. And then these prisoners, former illegal immigrants, were released from CCOT and interviewed by 60 Minutes. So that's the background to how this interview came about. Reuters reported on January 18, 2026, that 60 Minutes show pulled the segment in December. So that would be December, just about a month ago. The given reason for pulling the show, Reuters reports, at least the given reason from Barry Weiss, the new head of CBS, is that additional information and context was needed in order for viewers to truly understand this story. Interestingly, Fox News on January 18 reported that this interview did in fact run in Canada in December. So it's actually possible to compare the differences between the Canadian segment that was run last month and the new segment that CBS is now planning to run in America. Fox News reports that this new segment run by CBS includes additional context, especially context that favors the Trump administration. It allows Trump administration statements to say that it was deporting these illegal immigrants in a pursuit of its duty to the American people to protect our country. And it tries to show in a good light the Trump administration's deportation of illegal immigrants. Now, this is perfectly fine to add additional context, but it builds on a growing string of criticism of Barry Weiss, this new head of CBS. She has been criticized because instead, CBS previously was a much more left-wing news outlet. Barry Weiss, though, is a more right-wing leaning media figure. So her influence on the company has drastically changed its style of reporting over just the past few months. She's faced criticism for her reporting. So, now that we've seen the actual background to the story, we can ask, what duty does the media actually owe us as its consumers? What does it need to do? Ben Shapiro, the conservative author and speaker, gave a fantastic speech at America Fest, a festival to celebrate America hosted in Phoenix, Arizona. He gave this speech in 2025, so just this December. And his speech outlined the duty that media owes to us. He said that first, media owes us truth. Media should not be deliberately obscure. This matters in the context of the 60 Minutes interview, because 60 Minutes must give us the actual information around this event, around what's happening at CCOT. So obviously, excluding the Trump administration's point of view, being deliberately obscure, would be unfair to us, the viewers. Similarly, Ben Shapiro in the speech said that there is a duty of media to provide actual evidence to back up their claims. It would be unfair for 60 Minutes to simply present this interview and allow every single statement made by these illegal immigrant deportees to go unchecked if, in fact, they made many unchecked claims. So CBS owes both the duty to truth and not being obscure and a duty to evidence. As we can see from the story, it appears that Barry Weiss does in fact have intentions to simply provide more deliberate is simply trying to be more deliberate in her presentation of truth and provide more evidence for viewers. So, because as we've seen, Barry Weiss was simply trying to provide more evidence to viewers and genuinely hear out the other side, the Trump administration side of the issue, we can conclude that it's a good idea, that it was in fact a good idea for them to withhold this story for a month.